Welcome. Welcome to the Fresno Community Steering Committee AB 617 March meeting. So if you don't know me, hello, my name is Crystal Lazard. I am with the Institute for Local Government. I am one of your facilitators. My co-facilitator is Hannah Stomachevich, who is right here. This is Hannah.
Hello.
Together, we're going to be guiding you through this meeting and making sure that we're taking notes and process and listening and accomplishing all the goals. Tonight, after the welcome and introductions, we're going to have an update from a couple different members in regards to the CARB February hearing. Then we're going to get into the Serp strategy implementation. So as many of you know, we had a big milestone in February, and we're moving into implementation. So we're going to talk tonight about regulatory enforcement and incentives, focusing on some of the strategies. We're going to move into an incentive strategy implementation exercise, which is why you guys are in small groups and there's flip charts, and we'll explain later what we're going to do there. We are going to touch briefly towards the end on the Community Steering Committee participation and resident stipend question. Many of you have been raising this question, especially during the evaluation when we realized some 617 committees were getting stipends and some were not. And then we'll wrap up at the end and retouch on kind of next steps. Any questions before we begin? Okay, I'm going to give it to Ryan. You were kicking it off.
Oh, man. Oh, thank you so much. All right. So yes, very, very big day that we had last month with the adoption of the South Central Serp. It definitely was a process that could not have been done without everybody in this room, both the steering committee members, members of ARB in the back, the business community, everybody. It was a joint effort. We came a long way. We had 18 steering committee meetings. We had numerous subcommittee meetings. All that was essential to being able to put together a really, really good SERP with a lot of measures that once implemented are going to bring substantive change to the South Central community. And so I think at this time, everybody that was involved in it really deserves a great big hand for all of their effort. So good. So implementing it or getting the plan or the program approved is a huge step. But now the real work begins. Starting today, and even going back with the early implementation of some of the emission reduction strategies. But speaking for myself, Samir, and the rest of the staff at the Valley Air District, we're really excited about the opportunities that this presents and working with you and continuing to come up with ideas and ways to make these changes happen as quickly as possible and to improve everybody's lives in the South Central community. So once again, thank you everyone, and I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Okay, Kevin tonight is our community co-host. Thank you so much, Kevin. He was responsible for helping to develop tonight's agenda. And while Kevin comes up, I just want to note that if you don't already have dinner, please feel free to help yourself, like usual. And the bathrooms, since this building is new to us, the bathrooms are like to the left of that sign and around the really old, cool-looking telephone booth. So thank you, Kevin.
Hi, good evening, and thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Really excited about tonight. I think this is the first night that I feel like we're at a point where we can leap off here and move this forward and have it evolve into really what we want it to be. And that's cleaning up the air in the neighborhoods where everybody here works and lives every day. So I'm really excited to be here, excited to have this happen. Thank you for inviting me to co-host tonight. I do want to thank the Air District for working closely with us on the agenda tonight, and the EJ team and the residents who were in the meeting where we reviewed that as well. And I think we have a good agenda tonight that reflects what all of us want to see in an agenda at one of these meetings. And we'd love to hear feedback from folks, and if they have concerns and other things they want to see on that agenda for next month, please let us know ahead of time. We want to make that happen for you. So if there's anything you need to know, any more information you need to have, we're here for that. The second thing that's available tonight is many people were asking Who do I talk to? Who's working with the city? Who's working on this truck rerouting? Who's working with the schools? Who's doing all of that at the Air District, at ARB? So worked with that team tonight, and they very kindly put together a list of all those contacts. It's been set out electronically. It's on the website, and it's right here for you tonight. For some reason, it's on tiny little pieces of paper, but no, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But yeah, so everybody's name is here. Enforcements, Jake Felton. I don't think I've ever met Jake, so I'm excited about that. Land use, so it looks like Arnaud and Jamie are double teaming the city on this one. Mitigation or working with people who are polluting to reduce the amount of pollution or eliminate what they're giving is Jessica, who's been leading this whole effort. And I should say, just to remind people, Jessica is actually the 617 leader now for the Air District. Am I correct there? So just so everybody knows, if you can't think of anybody else to talk to, yell at or otherwise congratulate, Jessica's right there if you don't know her. And more important, I think one of the most important things is the planning piece of this, and John Klassen has that, and I think everybody here has met John at one point or another. There he is back over there. So I think it's important to put, is Jake here tonight by any chance? So at some point in time, it's always good to put faces onto these names. So I'm sure if you want to meet with these folks, phone number's right here, email's right there, give them a call. Meeting with one person, meeting with a group, I'm sure they'll be glad to accommodate you. So to me, that was a great accomplishment tonight as well. And again, I want to thank you folks for handling that. We'll be looking forward to the ARB one soon. Other than that, I think we want to move on. I want to introduce Karen Magglio. It's especially kind of sad and happy for me tonight with Karen, because Karen is an old friend who, for many years, has been very helpful to the San Joaquin Valley in many ways. Early on in our relationship, we were trying to figure out how air pollution affected asthma visits in an ER, and we needed information, and we couldn't get it from the Air District, and I cold called this lady named Karen, who I'd never met, and who had never met me, and I said, we really need this, and she says, oh, no problem, here, and gave us all that information, as much as we could take for 3 years. And so no money, never asked for anything, just said, hey, it's fine, call me again if you need anything else. And that, as much as anything, has sort of shaped our relationship moving forward. So she's retiring. This is the end of her focus here with us, and her last trip, do you think, to the San Joaquin Valley here for this? Next time it'll be going to Yosemite or something, right? So I do want to thank her for all her hard work with us, and I think we should give her a round of applause. Thank you. And so most importantly, at the last CARB meeting, not only the Serp was approved, but on condition that the Air District comply with certain modifications that were in a resolution that ARB passed along with the Serp. So Karen is going to talk briefly about the status of the resolution, because we don't have a copy of it right now because it always takes 2 months to get those done. I knew that going in because, unfortunately, I'm a veteran of several of these resolutions. I will tell you that they work, and it gives us something to hold people accountable for. And it's been really useful for that in the past. So I'm sure it will be again in the future. She's going to talk about that and what she knows about when we will have it, and as much as you know about what's in it at this point. So thank you very much, Karen.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Kevin. And I, too, want to thank everybody who was able to either participate in the community tours with our board members in the morning. Those have been so important to helping our board members understand the issues that you all face in your community. Those who are able to come down in Shafter and participate, especially like to thank the panel of community steering committee members that we had, which was Naimeen and Ed and Ivanka, who I know is not feeling well tonight, but Shada's going to be filling in for her. It was a very interactive discussion with our board. That's not usually how our board meetings work, but in this case, I think it was a really critical and really important conversation to have that really is helping to set a very clear and positive path forward, as Kevin was talking about. And as he mentioned, because we're a bureaucracy, it does always take what seems like too long to finalize resolutions. But what I want to do is walk through tonight, based on our notes and what we've been working on, what all those changes are, because I think they really help set the stage for what that direction is. So I'm just going to walk through sequentially on the items that were in the resolution itself. So the first one was, we already had a recommendation in there that this group collectively work together to work through adjustments to funding allocations based on discussions that you're having. As part of that, we added in that it's not only discussions, but it's really based on Community Steering Committee recommendations themselves. But as part of that, there was one specific item that many of you felt was a critical priority, and that was being able to provide funding for the truck rerouting strategy that's in the plan. So now there is specific language that will say the district will seek co-funding from the city to be able to implement that, but if that co-funding is not sufficient, then the district will provide full funding for that truck rerouting study. The next item was one that was looking at the review of stationary source rules for sources within the community. And this one there'll be added language that says there will be a complete rule assessment for all of those sources within the community, and that completed by the end of this year. Then there was also a lot of discussion about, of course, the ongoing collaboration with land use agencies. And we expanded upon the existing recommendation that that collaboration occur, but also to say that the district will seek to establish a memorandum of understanding or another appropriate mechanism with city, county agencies to really help work through these issues associated with addressing air quality impacts and concerns in this community. And then the second part of this was we had made a commitment that we're continuing to move forward with our freight handbook that's sort of laying out best practices for dealing with both existing and new freight facilities, and further expanded upon that based on discussion that we will work with the district and this committee to really try and advance the best practices that are within that freight handbook concept paper, and very specifically pointing to summaries within there where all those recommendations are located.
Is the comment period still open for the freight handbook?
I believe it closed at the end of February, but you could always continue to send in comments and we'll make sure they get to the right staff on that. And then we had a number of things that were related to sort of enhanced reporting back and how implementation moves forward. So one that was very important is an opportunity to have us, the district, and you as the steering committee come back and report back to our board about how things are going in 6 months, and then actually do that on a semi-annual basis. And our board member, Sandy Berg, specifically directed that that next board meeting happen here in Fresno. The other part of this would be that there's already requirements for sort of annual progress reports, and that part of that would be that making sure it's a very collaborative process with the steering committee in assessing progress that's been made to date, but also that that report does include specific documentation of all of the information or thoughts and perspectives you have on progress overall. And then the last piece is that we'll be working at CARB on a template for how we report back on implementation itself. And that'll be provided to all of the air districts across the state that have communities that are working on implementing emission reduction programs. But the other, I think the last key element to highlight on that is that that should also include any new strategies that have been identified by the community itself and how those will be implemented going forward. So I think that captures everything that we had heard from board direction. We've been going back, listening to the archived webcast and the transcript itself, and our goal would be that this would be out in the next couple of weeks. So questions?
Thank you, Karen. Before we go to questions, if you have questions about this resolution and it happens to occur to you after Karen has departed and retired, Veronica is been generous enough over here. Veronica Eady, who's also CARB leadership, will be happy to talk to you about your questions. Any burning questions for Karen before we move on? Yeah. Well, you are also the next agenda item.
I think it's going to be hard to add anything. You did a wonderful summary of a very long meeting.
Very long, very important.
Important but long. So my question is, in everything that you mentioned, did I miss something about the emission reduction targets per strategy?
So that was essentially already in here, that continue to add on where they can be quantified, coming up with estimated emission reductions for the different strategies. Yeah.
It's there. Okay. Any other burning questions for Karen? Want to move us on? I think we're a little behind. Okay. We have.
Oh.
Sorry, Ed.
Kind of goes a little bit different, but before we start another subject, Kevin, thank you for your efforts with AB 617. They're certainly appreciated. You're on the consultation group, and they met last week, and there are some proposed changes I hear. I don't know this for certain, but could you give a short summary of that meeting?
For those who aren't aware, and there's another member of that group in the room here. Where is she hiding? Anyway, so the 617 consultative group is a body that is appointed by the Air Resources Board to oversee the development of and advise the Air Resources Board on the Blue Book, the blueprint that you are referring to, which is the guideline for how you go forward with AB 617. The contents of that blueprint and its guidance for the purposes of this work, this piece of AB 617, of which there's 4 other pieces in AB 617 besides this work we're doing now, has ended. So it kind of leaves you off with the fact you've got this community edition emission reduction plan, and go forward and clean the air. So the consultative group is now looking at next steps, and one of those was asking for the revision, the update on the blueprint, so that it maps a way forward from here for us. And the second thing we asked for is the learning from the first 10 communities be added to that and provide guidance on things like, we spent 4 months working on boundaries for this thing. So it backed us up about 4 months at that time. We spent 2 meetings working on governance. How do we vote or not vote? Maybe 3 meetings. So again, slowed us down. But everybody had the same experience across the state, by the way. It wasn't just us. So now we know, and we have a good idea of what the model should look like. So the gist of that meeting, Ed, is nothing was changed in that meeting. The only thing that was really proposed is the blueprint be updated, and many of us listed the things we felt that update needed to contain, which I just mentioned a few. So there are minutes from and a recording of that meeting, so I suggest that you lean on that, or give me a call if you want to talk more about it. Okay?
Yeah, and we can send to the district to send out to the full steering committee where you can get the link to the recording from that.
Okay. I don't see a lot of other questions for Karen, so. Oh, Shada.
Hi, I hope what are 2 quick questions, and I am filling in for Ivanka, so doing the best I can in lieu of her mighty presence. The first question is, was there a timeline for the truck reroute study and the memorandum of understanding? I think I remember it being 6 months, but I wanted to be sure.
I don't recall that there was any discussion about when the funding had to be decided, but certainly as we think about this group reporting back to the board at that 6-month point, we would think that a very key focus of that should be progress made on those specific recommendations that came up at our board meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. And this is probably just me stepping into the process and having this question, but when you say emissions reductions or the requirement was already in the resolution, could you explain more what that meant? Is it a new to the resolution because the resolution is new, or are you saying it was already in the SERP?
Basically the latter. So we basically took all of the recommendations that we had in our staff report, and we very specifically included them in the resolution itself, so there's one place to go see what we already had, plus the new board direction. And the resolution is really the place that memorializes or formalizes that board direction.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, we're a little behind. But I do want to have each of the members that were in the panel, and Shada filling in for Ivanka, say what their experience was like, maybe pretty quickly.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to keep it short because, as I said, I think Karen summarized the most important things in the meeting. The only thing that I will add is that I will urge my fellow steering committee members to be willing to have more than one meeting, because the 6 months that she was referring to is already 5. That was last month. That was on February 13. So I don't want us to be in the same place that we were last year when we were rushing the SERP and when we didn't even have a chance to look carefully and discuss and even vote on the final SERP that was put forth. So with that, I would just say that let's roll up our sleeves and make sure that we're already working on the implementation plan, and that I really hope to read the resolution soon so that I could see that, you know, everything that we had agreed on that day, it's going to be our guiding document. So that would be it.
Thank you, Naomi. Okay, I'm going to go Shada and then Ed.
I similarly will keep it short. I think the opportunity to sit at the table with CARB in the district is very welcome, and something that many residents and community members would like to see at these meetings too, is a kind of like live discussion and back and forth where the work can actually happen. So it was very appreciated and led to great outcomes. So yeah, thank you.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak for the committee. It continues to be humbling to learn all of the needs of everyone in this process, and then how do we affect those needs. I was very happy with, other than the amount of time that the meeting took, which was beyond torturous, 7 hours. So I was very happy with the board's response. Blindly, I was told that the board doesn't take usually comments, and we had a whole evening full of comments, and I'm thankful that the board was willing to at least discuss those issues along the way. So I think the process was very good, and I'm excited about looking at our current monitoring and seeing what that tells us, and looking at ways we can reduce emissions in our community.
Thanks, Ed. So we're going to have Brad do an update on monitoring later tonight. But next, I want to give it to Todd to do a quick update presentation on the SERP strategy implementation in regards to regulatory enforcement and incentives. Is that alive?
There we go. Hello? Hello? There we go. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Todd DeYoung. I'm the Director of Grants and Incentives for the Air Pollution Control District. I am here tonight to sort of give you a brief update on where we go from here in terms of the incentive-related SERP measures. A lot of hard work. Everybody, we came together, came up with a fantastic list of measures in the SERP. And now the fun part really begins. Now is when we start to implement those measures and really see the fruits of all of your labor over the past year plus. So I'm just going to start very briefly with an update on sort of the regulatory landscape and sort of the maze of regulation and enforcement that sort of governs what we do on the incentive side. So there's really two to three main areas of responsibility, and that's the CARB and the Air District, and then somewhat EPA. So essentially, CARB is responsible for on-road and off-road vehicles, new vehicles, and that would be statewide regulations and enforcement of those regulations. Other than aircraft and locomotives, those are covered by EPA. The district is really responsible for enforcement of regulations in two areas, and that's stationary and area-wide sources. stationary being industrial sources like gas stations, stationary engines, et cetera. We maintain over 650 rules and regulations, and we have a robust enforcement program that enforces those regulations. And then similarly on the area-wide, those are things like residential wood burning. Those are district-wide regulations, and the district, again, is responsible for the enforcement of those regulations. Again, another example would be fugitive dust. The district is responsible for regulating fugitive dust and enforcing those regulations. Now, I say this because as we work through the Serp and all the incentive measures that you guys came up with in the Serp and that were formalized in the process, is that the incentive measures have to go above and beyond what's required by regulation. In all cases, we can't pay for somebody to become into compliance with an existing regulation. The incentives are designed to go above and beyond. They have to provide benefit that's above and beyond what somebody's required to do. So this list right here is a list of the prioritized top incentive measures as prioritized by this group. Yes, sir.
If somebody fails a smog test on their personal vehicle, they wouldn't be allowed to have an incentive to get it fixed?
That is a great question. And actually, our tune-in, tune-up program does provide funding to get those vehicles repaired so that then they could. So that's kind of, you found kind of the one case where we're not paying for compliance, but we're paying for them to be able to go back and get a smog check and hopefully ultimately pass it. Or replace their vehicle with a cleaner vehicle that would pass it. Correct, yeah.
Industry,
But
not
no,
citizens.
you're absolutely right, though. Our tune-in, tune-up program does provide smog-related repairs that would then ultimately allow you to get back into compliance with the smog check regulation. So you got me. Good job. So this list right here is not an exhaustive list of all of the Serp measures. These are the incentive-related Serp measures that were prioritized through several meetings with this group, in which you were allowed to ask questions, and you sort of mulled these over and decided which ones you really wanted to see prioritized over other ones. It starts with school bus replacement. That was your highest priority. It goes into heavy-duty trucks and lawn and garden, and as you can see, the tune-in, tune-up events there, all the way down through the passenger vehicle replacement options. As you can see, HD9 for locomotive replacement was something that we heard through this process loud and clear that the committee was just not interested in at this point. And so we did take the funding from the locomotive component and we distributed that. And we actually want to get some feedback on where we think that should go. Some of the initial thoughts were put that into more school buses, electric school buses, and we can certainly do that. But we want to make sure that we have the committee's recommendation on where we should reallocate that funding from the locomotive section too. Yes, Naomi?
Now that we are going to add the new recommendation of using funding to pay for the rerouting study, right?
Yeah, that could be part of it, absolutely. Yeah, we could take that from the locomotive.
Todd, I have a quick question.
Yes.
In your initial comments, you were talking about gas stations and things like that. I don't see that on the list, but knowing that the incentive program is for above and beyond, gas station, literally every component in a gas station is a CARB-approved component. Where do you see that going?
So it's something that we could definitely look at. If there are options to replace components within a gas station with components that would get emission reductions above and beyond what would be required by, say, a district permit, then that's certainly something we could look at. It wasn't initially prioritized as one of the Serp measures, but I think we heard loud and clear, and I think we all are in agreement that this is a living document and a living process. And so we want to make sure that as new ideas come forward that we're able to incorporate those into the process. So certainly something that we could discuss. And again, this is a multi-year process, so if it doesn't get captured this year, it could get captured in year 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
So
Yes,
I see C2 up here on the very end, passenger vehicle replacement, and in hearing the gas station comment, it really brings into mind that a lot of these gas station owners are local businessmen who also have little grocery stores that are really critical for these communities, and many people, that's where they get a lot of their nutrition. And so we really push them hard to have some fresh, food assortments there available. But the other piece that you can be involved in and should be involved in, and to some level are, is how do we, number one, make sure that these cars are available to these communities in ways that they can use and afford them, and then where will they charge them? So there's a lot of money around right now, and we need to push for more to put charging infrastructure into these gas stations. And they can charge for that just like they would gasoline, but it's not as expensive. It's like 90 cents a gallon instead of $3 a gallon.
right.
So if we start doing that early and give those small businessmen that charging infrastructure, then the community sees a place where they can charge their vehicle, right? Instead of buying gas.
Right.
And over a period of time, maybe we can see that transition happen where we move from one to the other. But it's got to start somewhere, and I think these communities are a great place to start that.
No, that's a great suggestion, and that's exactly sort of the feedback that we're going to be looking for throughout this process, because, if there's funding that we have available for electric vehicle charging infrastructure, we need to know from you where you think it would be best served, and, so it's got to be that interactive process and working together on that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Todd, thank you for coming tonight.
Of course.
Quick question on the rail car mover and switcher replacement. Will that go through the existing program under Carl Moyer, or will that get an expedited type of implementation through this program?
So the answer is both.
Okay.
It will go through the existing process, by which I mean we will use the Carl Moyer program guidelines. It will get expedited, though. It won't have to, there's specific funding set aside for these types of projects, and they'll sort of jump to the front of the line, as it were. So they'll be on a sort of a fast track.
Should they be noted in the application where a facility is located, or?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be part of, one of the questions we have for you tonight is, how do we go out and find these projects? How do we go out and find these rail car movers and switchers, and get them to apply and start that dialogue with them? Certainly, they can notify us. They can call me directly. If they're in the 617 community, they've got a switcher and they're interested in replacing it. And we can start directly communicating with them and getting them through the process. So, but yeah, I mean, if they were just to apply, cold, we would want them to note somehow that they were in a 617 community. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go one more comment, but I want to make a note. Hold, just one sec. We are going to move into an exercise, and where we're going to talk about some of these measures in more detail. And there will be Air District staff in each group and also floating around that we could have some of this dialogue there as well. So I'm going to go one more comment and then yes? Or can it wait? Ed, I'm looking at you. Okay, we'll go one and then two.
Thank you. Scott Mosier, City of Fresno.
Yep.
Just wanted to say thanks for the partnership with the district. It's been a good process. And I just wanted to comment, since HD 11, the heavy duty truck rerouting, the study has come up. Just wanted to say we're eager to sit down with the district and basically look at how we can get started as far as what form of agreement, cooperative agreement, and get that process underway. So that's something that could come before our city council for an ability to move forward. So looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask you to be super quick, and then we'll move into the small groups.
Just to follow up with what Kevin had said earlier, there's actually 2 bills pending right now to do exactly what he said. I believe one is Ting and the other one is Christina Garcia, that essentially say that gas stations should have charging opportunities. So there's, of the 2,500 proposed bills this year, that's a couple of them. So.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Okay, and I'll go quick. I know we're sort of pressed for time, but I just wanted to kind of run through. So we have all these Serp measures, and we have some funding that's available, that was made available through the AB 617 process. To utilize those funds, we have to go through the community air protection guidelines that the Air Resources Board has developed. This includes following incentive program guidelines. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the Carl Moyer program. It's focused on a lot of mobile sources, basically replacing large diesel equipment with new cleaner diesel equipment or electric equipment. So those guidelines apply. So anything that qualifies for the Moyer program would qualify for this program. The Proposition 1B program was another state program related to goods movement and heavy-duty trucks. So we can place trucks under that program utilizing the CAP guidelines. Specifically for the CAP program, the Air Resources Board developed guidance for chrome plating operations. I don't believe that was targeted as one of your highest priority Serp measures, but it's in there. And then emission reductions related to schools, and this includes air filtration in schools, school transportation like buses, which I'll talk about in just a moment, and then composite wood products within schools. And so these guidelines will provide the framework to develop and implement the community-driven Serp measures that have been suggested and approved by this committee here. And so what we've done is we did an analysis on, this is the same list from a couple of slides ago, but what we did was we highlighted each one of the programs in green that is eligible right now under the existing CAP guidelines. So as you can see, school bus replacement, heavy duty truck replacement, the alternative fuel infrastructure, rail car movers and switchers. Of the programs that you guys have identified as your highest priority, these we can move on right away. The others are going to require us to go through a process with the Air Resources Board to get those programs and those types of projects approved for use with the CAP guidelines. The Air Resources Board is currently putting together what they're calling Chapter 6, and it's basically their guidance for packaging up these programs, submitting them to the Air Resources Board, and getting them approved. Unfortunately, that guidance isn't out quite yet. Chapter 6 has not been approved and has not been implemented just yet. But we've seen a draft of it, and we're working, we've been in discussions with the Air Resources Board management, and we understand that from what we've seen as a draft, the final version is not likely to change very much. So we're actually already starting to package up our programs, and with the anticipation as soon as Chapter 6 is ready to go, we're going to start submitting those to the Air Resources Board for approval. Once those are submitted and approved, then we can utilize the CAP funding on those types of projects. That includes a lot of the programs that could be approved air district programs that are just not necessarily approved to use under the CAP guidelines, like our tune-in, tune-up program, our residential wood burning, and our alternatives to ag burn program. That's our soil incorporation wood chipping program. Those are just some examples of programs that are district programs but not yet able to be used with the CAP guidelines. That's a great question, and we've been in contact with the Air Resources Board, and we're hearing within the next month or 2 months that it'll be out there.
So what type of an update can we really give to CARB in 5 months from now if
Well,
half the programs are stalled?
What I think we can do is we can give an update on all the programs that we can move forward on, and I've actually got an update for you on some of the projects that we've already started moving forward on just in later slides. But I think we can do a lot. I think we can, considering that Chapter 6 will be out, we can, we've submitted, X number of programs, and we're, working with the Air Resources Board on the approvals, and then all the ones that we actually can go forward with, we can move forward immediately. In fact, we already are.
Okay, we're going to go real quick to Laura, but then
Of course.
finish up.
Well, the problem with composite wood in our home was a fake kind of wood floor, and we had unsafe levels of formaldehyde every morning when I measured it, and I got my monitor out. Every morning, unsafe. I started losing my memory. Everyone in the whole house is sick. Kept getting flus, colds, more than I've ever gotten in my whole life, more than I've gotten when I was like living the sustainable lifestyle without heat, without electric, without running water. I was better. So I'm returning to the sustainable lifestyle. I have to go back in time to go forward and be 100% solar. Smaller, more traditional appliances.
Right. Thank you. So once these are approved, we can start utilizing the CAP guidelines and the CAP funding for those types of projects. And I think the main point to this slide, other than we're working through this approval process, is that the need for flexibility. And the flexibility has to do with the funding source. The funding source for this this year of the CAP funding has a liquidation deadline in June of 2022. So that's in our world, that's right around the corner. So this money has to be spent. We've got about $60 million, and we're going to be splitting it between this SERP and the Shafter SERP. And we have to have all the money liquidated. That means paid out projects on the road, school buses purchased by June of 2022. So I think what it's going to take is a lot of flexibility within this group. We're going to have to basically come back and say, hey, these programs are moving fast. These programs are moving slow. What do you think? Should we shift some funding to some of these other programs that can get this money spent and get these benefits to the community faster? So it's going to be a very interactive process, but we have to keep in mind those legislative requirements to get that money spent. And just real briefly, I wanted to go through at the time the Air District Governing Board approved the SERP and then submitted it to the Air Resources Board. We committed to this group that we were going to start. We were going to start working on those types of projects that we already knew that we had the authority to, and we're going to get moving. We had funding available, and we knew that we could get moving on some of these projects. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of these projects. The first being in electric school bus replacements. We've actually got 11 school bus replacements under contract for Fowler Unified that operates within the 617 community. We've actually got 2 electric school buses already on the road, and the other 9 are being purchased right now and will be put on the road very soon. We've got several heavy-duty truck replacement projects that we've identified that actually have addresses within the 617 community. So these are trucks that are operating within the community. These are residents of the community that are going to be benefiting from these reductions. And then some clean fuel infrastructure to support. We just closed an alternative fuel infrastructure request for proposals, and we're currently going through those right now, and we actually have identified a couple of projects that are located within the AB 617 community. So just the message here is that we've already started working. We didn't wait until the Air Resources Board last month finally approved the SERP, which was wonderful, but we committed to you to get going on those things that we could, and we've done that, and we're going to continue to do that. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, or we can just move into
I think we're going to move, actually, I'm just to stop us because we're a little behind. I'm going to move into the small group implementation to do exactly what Todd just mentioned, which is really give feedback and us be flexible on lots of things in regards to implementation. So you'll notice in your handout, if you don't have one, go grab one, but there's packets here, and each one of the packets in the back has the language from the strategies we're going to talk about in these small groups. So you have that as a refresher. It also has a very high-level summary of what we've heard from the Community Steering Committee so far, and some implementation feedback questions. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a minute is to stand up and move to the strategy that you were most interested in talking about. So this group up here is HD1. You can move wherever you want. So I would say you can rotate, but I don't want to force people to move if they don't want to move. So vote with your feet. So if you really want to spend the entire time, and we had 50 minutes, but I think may have to cut it down to 40 minutes. If you want to spend all your time with HD1, you can. You can also rotate. There will be a district staff member at each group to help capture the notes and the feedback, and then we'll have some time at the end to do some gallery walk where we walk around and see the way the discussion worked. So over here is HD7. Back in the corner here, we've lumped together HD9 and HD10 over by Larry, and then over here is C1. And we'll have the translators moving as well. And we'll see how. Any questions about this other than Naomi's question?
Will there also be a chance to share and discuss what happened, or will it just be the gallery walk?
During the gallery walk, we'll talk. We'll have somebody from the groups talk about what was shared and what happened. So I just want to make sure everyone sees, but in the interest of time, if you want to spend all your time in one group, you can. If you're like 10 minutes into a group and you're like, I really want to go over and get into that HD9 world, please feel free to move as much as you want. I invite the participants in the back, the public and CARB and otherwise, to participate as well if they would like to. Any questions before we move? Okay. Yeah. They're also in your packet, but I will definitely go back a slide. Okay, Jess. So, again, HD1, which is trucks, and then do we have a or an Air District staffer? Raise your hand. Thank you. HD1. Who is the Air District staffer staffing HD7? All right. HD7, school buses. Thank you. Okay, HD9 and HD10, locomotives and switch rail cars, combined in the back. And then, oh, that's Todd, okay. And then C1 is tune in, tune up. Thank you, Brian. Okay, move. I'll give you a 10-minute warning and a 5-minute warning before we're done. Okay, we are going to come back together. If I can have everybody focus your attention. We are going to have trucks go first, because why not? HD1. So what I'm going to ask each group to do, once we're all here, what I'm going to ask each group to do is to do a very high-level summary of the recommendations or the input that this group discussed. And then Kevin and I are going to kind of react and make sure all the stuff is documented. If you can't see this and you would like to, please feel free to stand up and move over.
Test.
Part of a gallery walk is to move around. So I'm going to hand it off.
Hi, Brian Clements. I'm with the Air District. And the exercise that we had a good discussion on trucks. And we had a few main points to share with the group. One of the main suggestion we had in targeting trucks and focusing on replacing trucks is target the short trip delivery vehicles in the community. And what we were getting at was try to find the businesses that have routes that are dedicated to those communities where all the emissions are currently in those communities, and if they were replaced, would get with cleaner, low emitting trucks, will get the full benefit of these incentives. So that was our number one suggestion. And in a little more detail, such delivery trucks, would be such example, like FedEx and UPS trucks that may have dedicated routes in the communities, garbage trucks, other utility work trucks, and then the goal would be all electric trucks as the primary emission reduction measure. We also talked about within that, finding those vehicles, but also focusing on or evaluating the percentage that could be funded to different businesses, focusing higher percentages to replace equipment for smaller businesses versus large. So maybe there could be some analysis there that shows that there's a benefit to the community for that. And then also just the main thing about, as Todd mentioned earlier, was it's important that we are able to communicate with the small businesses, identify them, contact them, start working with them as soon as we can. So beginning an outreach effort to identify these fleets where we can actually gather information and begin those conversations, we think is valuable. And there was also a good comment where a lot of the maintenance is done at some of the small repair shops in the community, so that may be a good place to start as far as gathering that information.
So I just want to wait a second while people get headphones here, because we've got a couple of folks that don't have headphones that need them. Can we get some technology over here? Oh, I think we already are. Yeah. Just give it a moment. So I've been asked to comment on these only because I do a lot of work on freight and heavy-duty diesel, and then I've got Karen and other folks in the room who are really knowledgeable on the rules and regs on this. Give it a minute here. Is that working for you? Senora? See? Okay. We have a technology failure. Okay. We could put it, yeah, I should say we can give you a chair right there.
If this isn't working, what we can do is not simultaneous translation, but consecutive. So after somebody says something in English, we can then translate it in Spanish, if that works.
It's okay, I
Do you wanna
do
do
this a
simultaneous?
lot. I think it'll be
Do you want to do
fine.
simultaneous, just like
We're good.
cluster? Okay, okay.
So I just wanted to bring up, all these things are great. This first group of short trip delivery vehicles are referred to as last mile trucks. And there's actually a lot of funding already statewide to change those out. So you're right on target with that. FedEx and UPS have both committed to converting their fleets. I can't remember what the date is, but they're already moving in that direction. And they've put in orders for hundreds of these new electric vehicles. So I think what you probably want is to know how many and when. Is that what I'm hearing? So I think you could add that to the list. Garbage trucks, so the EJAG, the Environmental Justice Advisory Group at the Air District, has voted for 3 years in a row on the grants funding from the Air District to include garbage trucks. So again, the Air District could report back to us on how many they've already converted, how much money's left in that fund in addition to this money. Because if there's already money for it, then I don't see why we'd want to spend this money too, right? Unless we need to. Is something that I always think of. Why, why do that? The goal is all electric by 2050 for everybody in the state. The incentive amounts for businesses large, I think that's great. I think there's a lot more work needs to be done on that. And then last, there is a project already going on, but it's located in the California Energy Commission, and it's called Cali VIP and then Alternative Fuels. And there's actually 2 groups in the valley that are holding meetings with fleet owners about changing their trucks over and getting that money to replace them. And in fact, there's trucks that are available. I have a list, and it's a public list where how many trucks are available that people aren't picking up on and swapping out their truck for. So that's already happening. So we need to get all that on the record. And then I agree with you, and we've been talking at the state about the need to run a lot of this through the local repair shops. I mean, we should be at Central Valley Truck Center saying, this is what, this is the technology. Because is anybody here from the ARB Enforcement Division tonight? Great, so you guys are going to be working hard. Maybe you could just say for a minute what the new technology is you have, and for being able to detect diesel emissions on the highway or next to the highway, and what you're planning to do here in the valley, if you don't mind, just briefly.
So just briefly, the Enforcement Division and other divisions within CARB have been working to develop like peaks technology. So that's supposed to be able to measure the emissions from the vehicles as they drive under, and that's going to be used as a screening tool to help the enforcement staff at a truck stop identify potentially non-compliant vehicles. And on top of that, I do know that they are working on other technologies and testing them in the field. If you want more on the technologies, I can come back next meeting with more information. But right now I know that they're trying like FLIR cameras and a bunch of other stuff.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move us along just because.
Anybody here knows what a FLIR camera is, but there's a camera they have that can actually see this pollution, just so you know. Anyway, yeah, so any other questions about this? I know we're working for time, but everybody needs to get a chance to speak if they want to. So is any other questions about this list before we move on to the next table? Ed, why am I surprised?
Well, you're
Yeah. One question, Ed, real quick.
My question is this. We had a speaker come a few meetings back that indicated that post office bought 10 electric last mile vehicles, and that wasn't the issue. It was never the issue to get the trucks. The issue was getting enough power in there to be able to run all 10. Does any of this include the issues that are related to bringing in enough power to be able to
So
address
the
that?
Clean Vehicle Funding Program at CEC for Energy for this is in process. They're deciding how much money to spend and where to spend it. And there's folks from the Valley, Ray Leone from Huron, and myself who are on that committee and pushing real hard on just what you're saying. So the grid is up. It's a matter of getting the power where it needs to be, and that's being worked on. So that's about all I can tell you there. So next table.
Next table, school buses. I'm going to ask you guys not to go point by point because you guys covered a lot of stuff, but maybe just a couple key issues. Know that we are including all of this in the meeting summary. And if you have other input around any of these strategies or any other strategies, you're also welcome to email that in after this meeting to Jessica.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob. If I haven't met you yet, I'm sorry, but I appreciate everyone that came by our table to talk about HD7 for school buses. Some of the big takeaways from the questions that were asked tonight is the targeted buses, 24 buses, is that sufficient? I think from what we heard from the group here that we're kind of flexible on that number. So if it ends up being 20 buses or 30 buses, it really just depends on what school districts we can get on board to take these electric buses. And I think one of the reasons why it's a little flexible too is the infrastructure was a concern. So that came up during our discussion. So there's a lot of need obviously for infrastructure when you're buying an electric bus. Some of these schools don't have the infrastructure currently to be able to charge these. So maybe instead of doing 24 buses, we can do 20 buses and then provide some incentive for infrastructure, or however that looks. And I think that's something we're going to have to work through with the steering committee and the school district. So that was one of the big takeaways. Another one of the big takeaways was how to prioritize not only the school districts, but the individual schools. So it sounds like we're not too concerned about what districts get the buses necessarily, but we want to make sure that the schools in the heart of the community and really the areas in those census tracts that have higher diesel particulate emissions are getting these school buses. And so that's something that we can focus on as we start looking at exactly what routes are in the community to address and work with those school districts and the steering committee to try to find those particular buses. So those were the big takeaways. I know there's a lot on here, and in the interest of time, I think we'll move on to the next one. But if you have any more comments, please feel free to reach out to us at the district, and we can help you with those. So.
Just before we go, is there anyone who wants to add anything to build on that as a main key issue? Nayamin.
I want the rest of the group to know that the Fresno Unified School District is not willing to receive 24 free electric buses. So a lot of our discussion here was how to turn them around and what's going to be our strategy to say, we have not worked that hard for you to say we don't want the buses.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to move us forward to rail cars and switchers real quick. Todd?
Thank you. Just real briefly, we had a great discussion here at this table, and actually we used it to make a lot of connections for potential projects. So it was actually very fruitful. I think we identified probably close to half a dozen potential switchers that are located and operate exclusively within the 617 community. So I think that was super beneficial in and of itself. So I think in general, the folks that stopped by our table wanted to make sure that the committee understood the mission reduction benefits and cost effectiveness of these types of projects. And perhaps they were suggesting that maybe some additional education were necessary to just show like what the actual benefits of reducing emissions from not only rail car movers and switchers, but line haul locomotives as well. And just sort of the bang for the buck that you could get with those types of projects. So the idea was there that maybe some additional education was necessary. And then we again did a bunch of work to identify sort of the inventory of the switchers and rail car movers within the 617 community, and we'll continue down that path. I got some great contacts so we can sort of mine some folks for some additional information there, so we know exactly who to reach out to start talking about additional switcher replacements within the community. And then we asked the question, okay, if not line haul locomotives, we understand that right now the community has not prioritized those, and we're supportive of that. If not line haul locomotives, and we understand why, because of the idea that maybe these don't spend a lot of time within the community, and they could be, all over the state or all over the valley, and we want to make sure that to the extent possible that the benefit stays here. So we understand that. So if not locomotives, then what? And so it was overwhelming the folks here at this table. If not locomotives, then something else that is as equally good or in terms of bang for your buck, and something that's going to get good emission reduction. So if we're taking money from the locomotives, let's put it into something like off-road equipment or on-road trucks, some of this heavy diesel equipment that can get you that good bang for your buck in terms of emission reductions and cost effectiveness. And then not necessarily directly related, but we wanted to make sure that apparently there's some legislation afoot there that seeks to take a lot of the high-speed rail funding away from the valley and shift it to other parts of the state, and to the extent that we can through this group, make sure that high-speed rail money stays here in the valley. So that was it.
Thanks, Todd. Does anyone quickly want to summarize any points that weren't yet captured, or any reactions from Kevin? I'm seeing head shaking. Then we're going to...
Question like the school bus question. So last year, the CEC spent $70 million on buses, and the Air District spent I don't know how much. I'd like to know how much money other than this they have available this year for buses, because I know that we decided at the EJAG that, again, we'd continue to focus on school bus changeout. Mm-hmm. So what I'd like to really see is a dollar figure beside each one of these things, certainly by the 2 or 3 meetings out, at least, if not the next meeting, the meeting after, I think should be a goal of the group, and then we could really move this forward.
Thanks for that. Hannah is capturing notes as we're talking, and we will transcribe all of these. We're going to end with tune in, tune up.
All right, thank you, everybody. So Measure C1 is in regards to our weekend tune-in, tune-up events, provides funding for vehicle emission-related repairs. The feedback that we got as part of this discussion was to conduct outreach through local car part stores as people are shopping for parts to get their vehicles fixed, providing some information there. Having more frequent events, kind of ongoing participation. Currently we have them 2 or 3 times a year. Some of the feedback we got was to have more frequent options. Increasing the incentive amount for repairs. Currently it's at $850. There was feedback that could potentially be increased to account for the high cost of vehicle repairs. Trying to find some locations in West Fresno and or downtown Fresno to host these events. Currently they're at the fairgrounds, Fresno Fairgrounds in southeast Fresno. Also conducting just ongoing outreach for the program, kind of tying into maybe the more frequent events and ongoing participation. So that was some of the feedback that we received as part of this discussion. Happy to answer any questions that you might have or additional feedback.
Not me? Here I go.
I remember that at one point when we were discussing this strategy, the residents had recommended that there was additional funding for low-income residents in the area, because as it is, there are multiple examples of people that could not get even when you give them $9,500 for a car, they cannot finance the rest to get a car of the model that they need. And I know Lilia has multiple acquaintances that were in that situation, and that's why the steering committee was making that recommendation. So I don't know where you are with that.
So I think that's really good feedback. This is in regards to just the repair side of the program. There's a different measure for the replacement component, but I think that's something that we can consider, and I hear your feedback on that as well.
So I do want to comment that while I'm certainly a fan of tune-up, tune-in, it carves out maybe 5–10% of the population that might need these vehicles. So if you don't have a car that needs to be repaired, that won't pass smog, you're never going to go to a tune-up, tune-in event. I mean, you're just not, because that's what they're designed for. And for that, they do a great job. But for the majority of this community sitting here at the table, they've got a car. It's an old beat-up car, and it probably does pass smog, but it's eating up, 12 miles to the gallon, and it's probably polluting everywhere. So where can they take that car and get it done in a convenient place versus calling the air? I know they can call you or call the air district, but where is there a location in their community where they can get that information, access that asset, that rebate, and talk about how maybe you can work something out for them to help them out?
And you're asking again about the replacement.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah, not the, well, I mean, you guys focused on the repair, right, yeah.
So we'll add that to when we get to that reduction measure. That's great. That's great feedback for that.
A mí en lo personal, yo tuve que dejar ir un carro que tenía casi 20 años con ese automóvil. ¿Por qué? Porque no pasó el smog. Fue en 1997 la camioneta. Me dieron el certificado de $500 y el pase se quedó en el taller mecánico porque mi camioneta no pasó.
I had a truck personally for 20 years, and they gave me a $500 voucher, but I had to give it up because it was from 96, 97.
Ya, entonces yo tuve que dejar ir mi camioneta mejor al desaguadero o al donde se los apachurran, porque realmente, ¿y qué pasa con ese vale que ustedes dan de $500?
So I just needed to take my truck to the dump, and what do you guys do with those vouchers?
Realmente para mí ese programa no funciona.
That
en lo
program for me
personal.
does not work personally.
I think I got the gist of the question. Was in this particular example, sounds like you had a voucher. We can kind of talk offline. The intent of the program is to provide emissions-related repairs for high-emitting vehicles. We test those vehicles at the event. Vehicles that fail smog can receive up to $850 in repair funding. That is separate than our replacement program, which we've heard feedback from you guys about expanding criteria, about expanding potentially the incentives that are available there. If there are portions of the program that don't work, I think that's what we want to understand and be able to implement within this strategy. So I would like to understand maybe what specifically in that case didn't happen, but the idea is to be able to provide funding for people to get their cars repaired with really no additional strings attached, no additional requirements for model year, anything like that. The only requirement is that you have to have a high-emitting vehicle.
Okay, actually, I'm going to try to get to a couple really important key things before we move on, and then we can continue this discussion, perhaps. But can we see if there's any other final thoughts on
this
this exercise? And then Jessica is going to lead us through a very quick update on the 2020 topics.
Well, I think Jessica is also going to talk about next meeting, right?
Yes.
And what the agenda looks like.
Yes.
So let's
Yes.
move that along.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, I think I know everyone here, so hopefully you know me. Jessica Olson, I work for the Air District. The main, and I'm going to slow down, I've learned for our translation. The main things I'm going to talk about right now, just given a short period of time, is we have heard a lot, and we are learning a lot from both this community and Shafter about what we want to hear at regular meetings. And so we're going to try to start here at the next meeting, which right now is scheduled for April, to give regular updates every single meeting about ongoing implementation of all the measures, including bringing to you what the district is doing and what the city is doing to work together on the important issues of the MOU and the funding for the truck rerouting. So we will commit to bringing at least a status update to every meeting about that. We are also going to come up with some updates on monitoring and where we are, and quick data updates. Sometimes we'll go into more depth, but regularly we'll just kind of give ongoing updates. Finally, our plan for the April meeting is to talk about all those mitigation measures that were also very high on your list, but they weren't on Todd's list. Things like urban greening, vegetative barriers, I have them written down, weatherization and energy efficiency, and air filtration. Those were big things that we all prioritized early on. We want to bring in all the partners related to those different aspects, Tree Fresno, Caltrans, the Fresno Economic Opportunities Commission that know all of those programs and can get you a way to directly benefit from them very soon. So that is the plan. If we hear otherwise, and we're going to talk a little bit later about community co-host, we'll continue to work with the community on developing the exact agenda. So I believe for the sake of time,
Yeah, Brad was gonna, well.
yeah, is there any other main things for sort of the upcoming meeting and ongoing meetings? We are flexible, so we have Kim.
Just one suggestion. There's meetings that are happening the same time that we have our meeting here. That is the TCC meetings that are happening right now. So that's why a lot of our committee members are not here, because they're at that meeting. So just wondering if we can switch a day.
So let us know when that happens. We're trying to keep track, but we were also trying to, we've had the second Wednesday of every month since I think the beginning of us meeting. So we've tried not to stray from that, A, because we try to book all of the location ahead of time, and B, we want people to regularly understand. But if it comes to your attention before hours that there is a big meeting happening and we can be flexible, let us know as soon as we can, and we can certainly, and that's really good feedback to know.
Is it monthly? It's quarterly.
Quarterly. So we'll definitely check right now, next quarter, and make that adjustment as soon as possible. That's great. Thanks, Kim.
Okay. That's actually a really great transition to Heather's part.
Ooh, careful. She's up. She's still up. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Hanks. Hopefully you know who I am, too. Not going to dance, Kevin. Let's talk about facility. Thank you so much for your patience as we have bounced around to various facilities over the course of our planning. We are still seeking actively a venue for every single meeting, and actually might be leaning on our city folks. I know they don't know I'm going to say this, but the risk department at the city, if we can get maybe the directors in the room to lean on the risk department to approve some insurance, because we're good for our insurance, hopefully we can get our next meeting at the senior center at Ted C. Wills. So I checked some dates with those folks, but we're not within the timeline that risk wants, but I'm winking and nodding, and we'll get a location, and I'm still open to all of your suggestions and input for future meeting sites. So please, you all have my email. I send you emails all the time. Write me if you've got a place you want me to check. I'm on it.
Okay. Okay, we are going to go to stipends. I'm going to go to Ryan first.
Remember that they had mentioned to me that Sequoia Middle School, which is just next door to Bampa where we were meeting, that they all have connections there, and the school has different facilities, or not only the cafeteria, that could be a good space for us.
That's good. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, quickly.
All right. Once again, Ryan Hayashi with the district. So the issue of stipends did come up a few times. It came up in the meeting in Shafter, the adoption, as well as in the consultation group. And during those discussions, we have stated that we are supportive of the process, or the concept of the stipends. And one of the things so we've communicated back to ARB, because we are looking for this to be done consistently throughout the state. During the first year, some communities did get stipends, some didn't. So what we've asked ARB to do, and through the blueprint, is to incorporate the framework on how stipends would be given. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Karen to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, sure. And first, right, just wanted to underscore, we've heard you. Our board heard you, the consultation group heard you. So that is one of the things that we will be putting in as a requirement when we do the blueprint update, that stipends should be provided. And then, as Ryan just said, what we're in the process of doing right now is compiling information about how stipends have been handled in a couple of different steering committees, and then be able to look at that to develop something that can be used as guidance, so there is consistency amongst them. And so, that'll be looking at what the amount would be, who would receive the stipend, what kind of attendance requirements there might be associated with it, and then just figuring out the overall mechanics of that. So that's something we'll be working on very quickly.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask Ryan to step in one more time. Currently, our next meeting is April 8th, but we are going to double check that against different facilities and not conflicting with other high priority meetings in the community. Naomi, I see your hand, but I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to have Ryan touch on the issue that's been dominating the news, COVID-19.
Come on. My question is that there was an effort to recruit or reconfirm the membership of steering committee members. So I would like to know who actually resubmitted their forms. I want to know if we are still in compliance with the fact that we need to have 51% of residents. And if not, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to kick industry out? Are we going to reopen the enrollment for other residents who want to be part of this? So.
Okay, the sign-in, I'll let you handle this.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Naomi. We definitely need more residents. In fact, I don't think we have her here, but we've got a new one on the roster. This will give you a sense of the folks that are still left, and if you don't mind, I would be happy to get your support in seeking those residents' renewal. If they don't have a check mark, we haven't got their renewal. So I definitely can get you that list and update it, but please, by all means, and we'll go to you, Ed, we definitely need to recruit additional residents, and we'll continue to do so and are happy to accept them as you find folks for that.
I just want to make the comment that the blueprint indicates that residents and businesses that are in the area are the same essentially. So as we continue to grow, I think it's important that we look at the Hmong community and try to get some representation there. But this is a very important thing. It should not just be this handful of people that shows up all the time.
Thank you, Ed.
So thank you for bringing it up, Crystal. So it's definitely a topic of concern for many, many people, the COVID-19, the coronavirus. The district is actively paying very close attention to the information that the CDC is putting out, the California Department of Public Health, the public health officers from the counties, and that'll be informing our decisions on future and upcoming meetings. We definitely value everybody's safety, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything to keep everybody as safe as possible. So thank you for your understanding as we continue to navigate these ever-changing the world that we're currently living in. So thank you.
Breaking news. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask for a volunteer. If you liked what Kevin did tonight and you think, man, I could do that too, does anybody want to volunteer to be the community co-host in April, assuming we have an April meeting? If we don't have volunteers, we will follow up with folks afterwards, but does anybody have a burning desire? I see finger pointings and I don't see hands. All right. Thank you. Okay, any questions about anything? We're over time, so I want to be very cognizant of that. I also want to give Kevin an opportunity to say something. No. Oh, I see hand waving.
Naimeen says, no, don't do that. No, I just thank you for agreeing to be co-host. I'm going to look back at the blueprint, Ed, but I believe you're wrong. I believe it has to be someone who works at a business, that lives and works at the business in that area, who would be considered a resident. So people who work for government fairs, and that's what they do for the whole business, do not count as residents, even if it's me too, by the way. So, okay, just so we're clear. This has been a great meeting. Again, thank everybody for coming. Have a good evening. See you later.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody. Take any leftover food that you see. Thank you so much. Again, if because of the COVID issue, this meeting gets canceled, you will get an email from us. If not, we will see you on April 10th.